When the lawyer slid the will across the table and I saw my father's signature, my first thought wasn't about the house or the business, or even the old truck he loved more than birthdays. My first thought was, that doesn't look like his hand. It was a Tuesday afternoon, hot enough that the blinds in the conference room were pulled halfway down, so the sun just left these yellow stripes on the polished table. I remember the air conditioning humming, the faint smell of stale coffee, and the way my stepmother, Vanessa, sat there like it was just another errand. Her nails were bright red. I still remember that. Tapping against the arm of the leather chair, impatient, as if my father's entire life was a form she needed to sign so she could get to her next appointment. She was 28. I was 34. And my father was in the ground. The lawyer cleared his throat and started reading. I, Joseph Henry Coleman, being of sound mind and body. My ears were ringing. My hands were folded tightly in my lap, my fingers digging into each other. I stared at the folder in front of him, and I tried to imagine my father sitting where I sat, signing those pages with the same shaky hand that had struggled to hold a coffee cup those last few weeks. When the words finally cut through the ringing in my head, it took a second for them to make sense. I leave my primary residence at 412 Maple to my wife, Vanessa Coleman, in full. I leave my automotive repair business, Coleman's Auto, including all equipment and accounts, to my wife, Vanessa Coleman. I leave my 1972 Ford F-100 pickup truck to my wife, Vanessa Coleman. The truck. There was a clicking in my ears that I realized slowly was my own jaw tightening. That must be a mistake. I heard myself say, my voice small and raw. The truck. He always said that truck was mine. The lawyer's eyes flicked up, kind but tired. Like this wasn't the first time he'd seen a family split down the middle by paperwork. I can only read what's here, Miss Coleman. Beside me, Vanessa shifted, her perfume sweet and sharp like oranges. She let out this soft little laugh that wasn't actually funny. Joey talked about a lot of things, honey, she said, her voice smooth. But this is what he signed. I turned to look at her. Her phone was face down on the table, but the screen kept lighting up every few seconds with notifications. I could see the edge of a picture, her face by a pool somewhere, sunglasses perched on her head, lips pursed in that fake cute way she did for photos. My father hadn't even been buried a full week. The lawyer finished reading. There was some mention of a small life insurance policy, a few personal items, but it was clear. The house, the business, the truck, everything that had my father's name on it, went to a woman who had only known him for 3 years. I thought of the nights I'd slept on the recliner by his hospital bed, the way I'd spooned broth into his mouth when his hands trembled too much to feed himself. I thought of changing his sheets, of washing his hair in the sink when he was too weak for the shower, of driving his truck back and forth from the shop to home when he couldn't anymore. I thought of Vanessa posting spa selfies while I held a plastic bucket for him to throw up into. Do you have any questions? The lawyer asked gently. I looked again at the signature on the final page. The J looped wrong. Too high, too smooth. Daddy's J had always dipped low, like someone hanging off the edge of a cliff. I just have one, I said slowly. When exactly did he sign this? The lawyer glanced at the date. This was signed 3 weeks before his passing. 3 weeks before he died. 3 weeks before my father couldn't even hold a pen. Before Vanessa came along, it used to be just me and my father. I grew up in that little blue house on Maple, the one with the cracked front steps and the rosebush that refused to die no matter how many winters it saw. My mother left when I was 8. She packed 2 suitcases, kissed me twice on the forehead and said, "Be a good girl for your daddy, okay?" Then she walked out, leaving the smell of her perfume behind but nothing else. Daddy did the best he could. He worked long days at the shop, came home smelling like oil and metal, and still managed to sit at the kitchen table and help me with my homework. Our dinners were mostly simple: mac and cheese, chicken from the crock pot, grilled cheese sandwiches, but he always set the table. 2 plates, folded paper towels for napkins, a little jar of pickles in the middle, because he liked them with everything. Table makes food taste better, he'd say, winking. Makes it feel like we're living right, even when it's just leftovers. On Saturdays, we'd go to the farmer's market early. He'd buy tomatoes from Miss Clara because her tomatoes got sunshine in 'em, and sometimes if we had a few extra dollars, he'd let me pick out a slice of homemade pie. I'd watch him talk to people, customers, old classmates, church ladies, And I'd see how they trusted him, how they'd clap him on the back and say, "Joe, you're the only one I let touch my car." He built that reputation one oil change, one honest estimate at a time. When I turned 16, he put the keys to the old Ford F-100 in my hand. The paint was faded and there was a dent in the passenger side from where someone had backed into a post years before, but the engine purred like a cat. "This truck isn't pretty," he said, his big hand warm over mine, "but it's family. It's gotten us through a lot. And one day when I'm gone, it'll be yours outright. I want you to have something solid under your feet." I'd grinned so hard my face hurt. "You're not going anywhere, Daddy." He just smiled, that tired, knowing kind of smile. "We all go somewhere someday, baby. I just want to know you got something when I do." So I grew up believing the house, the shop, that truck, they were part of us. Not because of greed, but because they were woven into every memory. Christmas lights on the porch, the smell of fried chicken carrying from the kitchen into the front yard, the squeak of the shop door when you pushed it open. Life wasn't perfect. We didn't have much money. I worked after school answering the shop phone, sweeping the bays, then later, learning enough about cars to explain things to customers in plain English. After high school, college wasn't really an option with what we had, and honestly I didn't mind. I stayed. I helped. We made it work. Then, when I was 31, Daddy walked into the kitchen one afternoon with a woman on his arm. He had called the week before, telling me to come over for dinner. "I got someone I want you to meet." His voice had a nervous excitement in it that I hadn't heard in years. I imagined maybe he joined a church group, or reconnected with an old friend, or found some new doctor. Instead, I walked into the house and found a stranger, tall, thin, hair the color of bottled honey, sitting at my mother's old seat at the table. "Danielle," Daddy said, grinning like a teenager. "This is Vanessa." "Hey girl," she said, standing up. Her dress was tight, bright yellow, and her heels clicked on the linoleum. She kissed the air next to my cheek, her lipstick leaving a faint smell of vanilla. "Your daddy's told me so much about you." Her voice had that sing-song lilt that sounds friendly until you realize it's just a habit. I forced a smile, took her in perfect makeup, long fake lashes, a phone peeking out of her bag with a glittery case, and felt something in my chest tighten. "Nice to meet you," I said. "How long have you two known each other?" "Oh, a few months," Daddy said quickly. "We met at the diner. She was working the tables and, well, we just hit it off." Vanessa laughed, reaching out to squeeze his arm. "He left me a $20 tip on a $10 meal." I said, "Either you can't count or you trying to impress me." She winked. Turns out, it was a little bit of both. Daddy's ears turned pink. I'd never seen him look bashful like that. We ate dinner, spaghetti that I noticed Vanessa didn't help cook, but she took plenty of pictures of the table spread. Right before we bowed our heads to say grace, she held up her phone. Wait, this light is so good," she murmured, angling it just so. "Okay, smile." The flash went off. Daddy chuckled. I picked up my fork with a knot in my stomach. That was the night I realized my father was lonely in a way I hadn't really seen before. And it was the night the first small crack appeared in the world I thought was ours. After that first dinner, Vanessa was just there. First it was weekends. She'd come over Friday evening with a little overnight bag and a bottle of wine, laugh too loud at Daddy's old jokes, and walk around the house like she was inspecting a rental. I'd stop by on Saturdays to bring groceries or help with laundry, and I'd find her on the couch, feet up, scrolling through her phone while some reality show played in the background. One Sunday, I came in with a bag of tomatoes from Miss Clara's stand, the way I always did, and I found them in the living room taking selfies. "Babe, do the one with the kiss," she said, holding the phone up high. Daddy leaned awkwardly toward her, his lips barely puckered, cheeks pink. She threw her arm around his shoulders and kissed at the air next to his face. "Say my man still got it," she giggled. No, wait. Age ain't nothing but a number." He laughed, embarrassed, but he let her post it. I watched from the doorway, my grocery bag getting heavier by the second. That night, when I was in the kitchen washing dishes, Daddy came in behind me, wiping his hands on a towel. "You okay, baby?" he asked. I shrugged. "She's a lot." He chuckled. "She is, isn't she?" He leaned against the counter, looking suddenly younger and older at the same time. "But she makes me feel, I don't know, like I got another chance at living before the good Lord calls my number." I set a plate in the rack and turned to look at him. You don't need a girl acting half her age to have a second chance, Daddy. You could take that trip to the lake like you always said. You could join a fishing club or… Danny. His voice was gentle but firm. I know you worry. I know she's young. But I've been alone a long time. It's nice to have somebody who wants to hold my hand once in a while. That shut me up. Because the truth was, I'd seen him eat too many dinners alone at that table. I'd seen him stare at the TV while the house creaked around him. No voices but the ones in his head. So I swallowed my unease and nodded. If you're happy, Daddy, I want you to be happy. He smiled, reached out and patted my cheek with those rough mechanic hands. Then let me figure this out. And you just keep being my girl. That's all I need from you. Within 6 months, Vanessa's toothbrush was in his bathroom, her shoes by his front door, her coats hanging in the hallway closet where my mother's used to be. She quit the diner because Joey doesn't want me working so hard. She told me, sipping iced coffee from a plastic cup while I folded towels at the kitchen table. He says he can take care of me. Daddy would grin and nod, proud in a way that made something twisted sit in my throat. She started talking about fixing up the house, painting the outside, knocking down the wall between the kitchen and living room, getting real granite countertops. This old place just needs a woman's touch, she'd say, standing in the doorway with her hands on her hips, barefoot but with full makeup on. We could make it like so cute, Pinterest level. I'd look at the cracked linoleum, the slightly crooked cabinets that Daddy had put up himself, the little pencil lines on the doorway where he'd marked my height over the years, and I'd think it already has a woman's touch. Mine. But out loud all I said was, just make sure you don't knock down a load-bearing wall. She laughed like I'd made a joke. The engagement came a year later. I came over on a Thursday evening after closing up the shop. Daddy called saying, swing by if you can. I got news. His voice had that same excited tremor, the one from the night I first met her. When I walked in, there were rose petals on the table, a cake half-eaten, and a ring on Vanessa's hand the size of a small marble. Surprise! She squealed, thrusting her hand into my face before I'd even put my purse down. We did it. We're getting married. Daddy stood behind her, beaming, his shoulders a little hunched but his smile wide. Congratulations, I said, stunned. When did this happen? About an hour ago, he said. I asked her right here. Didn't want anything fancy, just us. Vanessa snorted. I told him we are definitely having something fancy, don't you worry. But I said yes anyway. She kissed him on the cheek, already reaching for her phone. I gotta post this. My followers are going to die. I don't remember what I said after that. I remember hugging him, the smell of engine grease still lingering on his shirt, even though he'd closed early to cook dinner. I remember staring at that ring and trying to silence the voice in my head that whispered, with what money? A month later, they were married in a small ceremony at the courthouse. I stood beside my father as his witness, while Vanessa wore a short white dress and cried real tears that left her mascara perfectly streaked. On the steps outside after they kissed, she leaned into him and said, We gotta get all the paperwork changed now, babe. I want your last name on everything. House, business, bank accounts, the whole package. She laughed as she said it, but I watched the way her eyes sharpened, the way her fingers tightened just for a second on his arm. For the first time, a thought cut through all my rationalizations. What exactly does she think she's marrying into? The first serious sign that something was wrong with Daddy came on a Tuesday morning at the shop. I was at the front desk going over invoices when I heard a clatter from the bay. A wrench hit the concrete, then a soft curse that didn't sound like his usual easy drawl. I walked back and found him leaning against the open hood of a sedan, one hand on his chest, his face pale and slick with sweat. Daddy! I rushed to him. You okay? He waved me off, breathless. Just stood up too fast, that's all. You're sweating. It's hot back here. It's November. We stared at each other for a beat. Up close, I could see the fine tremor in his hands, the way his shoulders seemed smaller than they used to be. Sit down, I said. Now. He sat on the rolling stool, stubborn as ever, but he didn't argue when I grabbed a bottle of water and pushed it into his hands. That night, I begged him to go to the doctor. He said he would. He said he'd make an appointment. Weeks went by. Nothing changed. Vanessa, I said one afternoon, catching her in the kitchen as she sprinkled chia seeds on top of some smoothie bowl she was photographing. "Has Daddy talked to you about going to the doctor?" She rolled her eyes, keeping her phone angled just so. "He's fine. He just needs to lose a little weight and stop eating all this fried food you keep bringing him. Men are such babies." "He almost passed out at the shop," I said, my voice tight. "That's not fried chicken. That's something else." She finally looked up, annoyed. "Look, if you're so worried, you take him." I told him not to stress. Stress is what kills people. You're stressing him out right now. She popped a strawberry into her mouth and went back to arranging her breakfast like a magazine spread. "So I took him. The doctor visits turned into tests. The tests turned into scans. The scans turned into the word I'd been dreading. Cancer. Not a little spot, not we caught it early. The kind of cancer that comes with charts and percentages and the words, 'We'll do our best.'" Everything after that felt like it moved in slow motion and too fast at the same time. Chemo. Pills. For drips. The smell of antiseptic and microwaved food in the hospital cafeteria. I'd sit by his bed, holding his hand through the waves of nausea, bringing him cool cloths for his forehead, adjusting his pillows when his back hurt. Vanessa came to the first 2 appointments. She took photos of their hands laced together, the hospital bracelet on his wrist. "My warrior," she wrote under the picture she posted. "Pray for us, y'all." After that, her visits got shorter. She'd pop in with a coffee, kiss his cheek, tell him she had to shoot some content or meet a friend, and then she'd be gone before the nurse finished checking his vitals. One evening, I walked into his hospital room to find him alone, the TV on mute, the 4-pump beeping because the bag was empty. "Where's Vanessa?" I asked, pressing the nurse call button and silencing the alarm. He looked at the blank TV screen. "She had some appointment." His mouth twitched in a small, sad, almost smile. "Young woman got to live her life, Danny. This isn't exactly a party." That night, when I scrolled through my phone in the dim light of the recliner by his bed, I saw her Instagram story. Vanessa in a fluffy white robe at some spa, glass of champagne in hand, the caption, "Self-care day. You can't pour from an empty cup." She'd added a little broken heart emoji. Like she was the one hooked up to tubes. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I turned the phone off and listened to my father's ragged breathing. The machines hummed. The air conditioner rattled. I felt something harden quietly inside my chest. The first real clue that something was wrong with more than just his body came one afternoon about 6 months into his treatment. Daddy was at home between chemo cycles, resting in his recliner. His hands were so unsteady by then that I'd started handwriting his checks for him while he signed. "Just write it out to the power company," he said, his voice papery. "Third time this year they threatening to cut us off. You'd think they'd let a sick old man slide." I sat at the kitchen table, the checkbook open, my pen scratching softly on the paper. Vanessa breezed in through the back door, sunglasses on her head, the smell of some expensive perfume swirling around her. "Hey babe," she chirped. "I need you to sign something real quick before I forget." She held a small stack of papers in a folder. I watched her from the corner of my eye as I finished filling out the amount. "What is it?" Daddy asked. "Just some boring stuff," she said lightly. "Bank stuff. I talked to that guy you like, what's his name? Elliot. And he said we should get our affairs in order. In case, It's just prudence." She said, "In case you die," without saying it. My hand stilled over the check. "What kind of affairs?" I asked, not looking up. She flashed me a quick, tight smile. "Grown folks' business, Danielle." "It involves my father," I said quietly. "That makes it my business too." She sighed dramatically. "Can we not do this right now? He's tired." Daddy lifted a trembling hand. "It's okay, Ness. Show me what you got." She slipped the papers out and put them on the little side table by his chair. He fumbled for his glasses, squinting. "I can read them," I offered, standing up. Vanessa stepped neatly between me and the chair, her smile never leaving her face. "It's really not that deep. Just some signatures so if something happens I don't get stuck in probate hell. You want that for me, don't you, Joey?" He chuckled weakly. "Lord, no, I don't want you in any kind of hell." He picked up the pen with fingers that shook so badly the metal clicked against the wood. I watched his hand hover over the line. The J he drew was smaller than I remembered. The line wobbled. "It's fine," Vanessa murmured. "Here, let me just steady your hand." She put her hand over his, guiding the pen. A little warning bell rang in my head. "You know," I said slowly, "we could ask Mr. Turner to come by. Daddy's had the same lawyer for 20 years. He'd explain everything, make sure." "We already talked to a lawyer," she snapped, her eyes flashing for a second before she smoothed her face back into something sweet. "Didn't we, babe?" Daddy nodded, distracted, his focus on the lines he was trying to complete. "Some fella she knows. Said he'd do it cheap." I opened my mouth, then closed it. My father, who taught me to never sign anything I didn't read twice, was letting a woman barely older than me hold his hand while he signed away something I couldn't see. I told myself I was overreacting, that he was sick, that he needed to feel like he had things handled, that questioning him in that moment would just make him feel small. So I swallowed my questions. I finished the check. I slid it into an envelope, and I tried to ignore the feeling that I had just watched something important slip quietly out of my hands. The last 6 months of my father's life felt like standing on a shoreline, watching the tide pull the sand out from under our feet. Little things started disappearing. At first it was practical stuff. The silver toolbox he kept under the kitchen sink, because you never know when a cabinet handle's gonna fall off. The records box he always kept in his bedroom closet with old bills and receipts. The small metal lockbox where he stored the deed to the house and the papers from when he bought the shop. "Where's the lockbox?" I asked one afternoon, helping him change the sheets on his bed. His breath was short, but he insisted on standing on his side, tugging at the corners. "Oh, Vanessa put all that in the safe," he panted. "Said we needed to organize. She's good at that stuff." "We don't have a safe," I said. He chuckled. "We do now. She got one from that big box store. Bolted it right into the floor of the closet so nobody could walk off with it." He glanced toward the door, where Vanessa's voice drifted faintly from down the hall as she talked on the phone. "Says she's better with paperwork than me, and I believe her. You know I always hated that stuff." I looked toward the closet. The door was half closed, a sliver of darkness between the wood and the frame. That little knot in my stomach tightened again. "Do you know the code?" I asked. He shrugged, already tired from the effort of changing the sheets. "I told her to set something easy I could remember. She says she did. I just can't recall it right now." Later that week, I tried the closet handle when I went in to put his clean clothes away. The safe was there, just like he said, new black heavy sitting back in the corner. The keypad blinked at me. I tried his birthday. I tried mine. I tried the last 4 digits of the shop phone, the year the house was built, the year he married my mother. Nothing. The little red light just flashed, stubborn and silent. As his health got worse, Vanessa got busier. She was always taking calls, always working on a collab, always trying to build something so we're not broke when this is over. That's how she said it. When this is over. As if this was a bad haircut, or a long winter, and not my father's life. Sometimes, late at night when he was finally asleep, I'd stand in the doorway of their bedroom and watch them. He'd be a lump under the blankets, his bald head catching the blue light from the street. She'd be in bed beside him, not touching him, phone glowing in her face as she scrolled, her fingers tapping the screen faster than his heart monitor. Once she looked up and caught my eye. For a second her face was naked, tired, frustrated, something sharp and hungry behind her eyes. Then she smiled. "Can I help you with something, Danielle?" she whispered. I just shook my head and walked away. It would be easy to paint her as a cartoon villain, to say she never cared at all. But I saw the moments when she'd sit on the edge of his bed and rub his arm, when she'd wipe his mouth with a napkin and whisper something soft I couldn't catch. I saw the fear on her face in the air once when his heart rate spiked, how she gripped the rail until her knuckles were white. I don't think she started out trying to be evil. I think she started out trying to survive. But there's a line between survival and greed, and somewhere in those last few months, she stepped over it. A few weeks before he died, I found Mr. Turner's card at the bottom of an old drawer in the shop office. It was yellowed around the edges, the ink a little faded. Harold E. Turner, attorney at law. Will's Estates, real property. I remembered sitting in his office when I was maybe 21, watching my father sign his first real will. It had been simple, the house to me, the shop to me, the truck to me. He wanted to make sure, he'd said, that nobody could come in here and claim what we built if I dropped dead in the parking lot. I ran my thumb along the edge of the card, the paper soft with age. On a whim, or maybe on something stronger than whim, I called. Turner Law, a woman's voice answered. How can I help you? I'm looking for Mr. Turner, I said. This is Danielle Coleman. He did some estate work for my father years ago. There was a pause, then a sigh. Mr. Turner's retired now, ma'am, but he still takes calls sometimes. You said Coleman? Joe Coleman from Maple. Yes, I said, surprised. You remember him? Everybody remembers Joe, she chuckled. Hold on, let me see if he's in. A few moments later, a man's voice came on, older, slower, but familiar in a way that made my chest ache. Danielle, he said. Well, I'll be. How's your daddy? The silence on my end answered for me. Oh, he said softly. I'm sorry, dear. I didn't know. He's still here, I managed. But he's not well. I had a question for you. I told him briefly that my father was sick, that he had a new wife, that there had been some paperwork recently. I didn't go into details. I didn't want to sound like some paranoid daughter scared of being replaced. Mr. Turner, I asked carefully, do you still have a copy of whatever will you drew up for him back then? I do, he said. I keep the originals in storage. Last I knew, it left everything to you with a small cash gift to the church. He came in here too, maybe 3 times, talking about updating when your mama left for good, but he never changed the main parts. I told him, Joe, if you trust your girl, you're fine. Has he worked with you since then? I asked. No, ma'am. Not for estate stuff. He cleared his throat. He did call me about 6 months ago, asking if I knew any younger lawyers who did things cheap. I told him cheaper doesn't always mean better. He laughed and said, You sound like my daughter. 6 months ago. Right around when Vanessa started using words like affairs in order. Thank you, I said. That helps. You watch out for yourself, Danielle, he said quietly. And for your daddy's wishes. Men get tired at the end. Sometimes they sign things they wouldn't have if they felt strong. His words sat with me long after we hung up. Men get tired at the end. Sometimes they sign things they wouldn't have if they felt strong. Daddy died on a Sunday morning in late spring. The dogwood tree in the front yard was blooming. White petals floating down like confetti, sticking to the windshield of my car as I pulled up. I'd left the hospital at midnight after his latest round of treatment, promising myself I'd be back by 8 with fresh clothes and his favorite blueberry muffins. The phone call came at 6:17 a.m. Miss Coleman, the nurse said, her voice thick with that professional kind of sympathy. I'm so sorry. Your father passed about 10 minutes ago. I don't remember driving to the hospital. I remember the nurse's arm around my shoulders, the smell of sanitizer and stale coffee. I remember the quiet. He looked small. So small. I sat beside his bed and held his cooling hand, tracing the calluses on his fingers, the ones years of wrenches and bolts had built. I realized, with a dull kind of shock, that this was the last time I would touch my father's hand without paper between us. The funeral was simple because that's how he would have wanted it. Church folks brought baked casseroles and pound cake. Old customers came in their work uniforms, wiping their eyes with the backs of their hands. Vanessa wore black, a tight dress and a veil that barely covered her eyes. She cried big loud sobs that made people pat her back and murmur, "Poor thing." Between the tears, she checked her phone, fingers flying as she responded to the wave of condolence messages that popped up under the black and white photo she'd posted. "Lost my soulmate today. I don't know how to breathe without you, baby." The comments were full of broken hearts and praying hands. No one saw the way she flinched when I asked her, quietly, if she'd eaten anything. "I'm fine," she snapped. "Grief is an appetite suppressant." And then came that Tuesday in the lawyer's office. Not Mr. Turner's office. A newer place in a strip mall near the interstate. The kind of building that smelled like fresh carpet and copy toner. The sign on the door read, Elliott and Associates, Estate and Financial Services in glossy blue letters. "This is who I was telling you about," Vanessa said when we walked in. "Elliott is a genius with retirement and wills and all that boring stuff." Elliott was young, maybe early 40s, with a crisp shirt and a tie that screamed weekend golfer. He offered us bottled water and a sympathetic smile. His handshake was firm but quick, his eyes flicking to Vanessa a little too often. He read the will in that same even tone I'd heard 100 times in movies, but hearing my father referred to as the decedent made something cold settle in my chest. House, business, truck, all to Vanessa. A small cash gift to the church, if anything was left after final expenses. Nothing to me. Not that I needed a windfall, but the nothing cut deeper than any dollar amount ever could. When he slid the document across the table for us to review, my eyes went straight to the bottom, to the date 3 weeks before Daddy died, to the line where his name was written. I stared. The J. Though. The way the Coleman curled. It was his name, but it wasn't his hand. I had seen my father try to sign his name lately. I had watched him struggle just to get the pen to stay between his fingers, the ink scratching hesitant waves across the page. This signature was too smooth, too clean, too strong. Is that his original signature? I asked, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. Yes, ma'am, Elliot said. Signed here in this office. And he was, like he was at the end? I asked. Weak. On chemo. Shaking. He was ill, Elliot said carefully. But he was of sound mind. I wouldn't have notarized otherwise. I looked at the witnesses' signatures, names I didn't recognize. Not the nurse he loved, not Deacon Harris from church, not Mr. Turner. 2 strangers probably from down the hall. He didn't ask Mr. Turner to review this? I asked. His longtime lawyer? Elliot's smile thinned just a fraction. He said he wanted to make things simple, given the circumstances. He was very clear about wanting to provide for his wife. Beside me, Vanessa sniffled, dabbing delicately at the corner of her eye. My father, I said slowly, told me for years that the house, the shop, and the truck would be mine. Oh, honey, Vanessa cut in, her voice dripping with pity. He said a lot of things back when he thought he had more time. He told me he hadn't updated his will since you were a kid. It wasn't fair to me. He wanted to make it right. I looked at her, at the glossy hair, the flawless makeup, the red nails. Then I looked back at that signature. And something in me, something that had been soft and doubtful and trying to be understanding for the last 3 years, clicked into place. I didn't say anything else in that office. I nodded when Elliot asked if we had any questions. I accepted the thin folder with a copy of the will inside. I walked Vanessa to her car and listened to her talk about next steps. And maybe selling the truck because it's not really her vibe. I got into my car, closed the door, and sat there for a long time with my hands on the steering wheel, the folder on the passenger seat. Finally, I picked it up. I opened the glove compartment and pulled out an old registration form, one my father had signed himself 2 years before he got sick. Same name, same letters. Side by side, the difference was glaring. One was tired, jerky, with the loops not quite closed. The other looked like it came off a stamp. Right there in that parking lot, with the sun beating down on my windshield and my heart pounding in my ears, I realized. Either my father had somehow gotten stronger in the last weeks of his life, or someone had helped his hand a little more than they should have. I didn't go home after sitting in that parking lot. Instead, I drove straight to the hospital. Not his room, he didn't have one anymore. Just the building where his name was still in their system, where the nurses at the 3rd floor station still recognized me and offered me those sad, tight smiles people give when they don't know what else to do. Hey, Miss Coleman, one of them said, Tasha, a young nurse with kind eyes and a tattoo of a tiny sunflower on her wrist. You doing okay? No, I was not doing okay. But I nodded. I had some questions about my dad's records. Is there someone I can talk to about that? She glanced around, then lowered her voice. You mean medical records? Yes, ma'am. She gave me a look that said, I know you're not fine, but I'll play along. You'll have to go down to records, but I can buzz you in. She leaned over, pressed a button, and handed me a visitor badge. You need anything else, you come find me, all right? Records was in the basement. No windows, just rows of filing cabinets and the soft whir of printers. The woman behind the counter looked up as I approached, her glasses half sliding down her nose. Can I help you? She asked. I placed both palms on the counter to stop my hands from shaking. My name is Danielle Coleman. My father was a patient here, Joseph Coleman. He passed last week. I took a breath. I need a copy of his chart especially around a certain date. She handed me a form. You're his next of kin? I hesitated. Technically, by marriage certificate and fresh ink, that was Vanessa now. I'm his daughter, I said. And I have a copy of a will that was signed while he was under your care. I need to make sure of something. Something in my voice must have gotten through. She didn't argue. She watched me fill out the form, then went to the back and disappeared into the maze of cabinets. 15 minutes later, she came back with a thin stack of paper and a small sympathetic frown. You didn't get this from me, she said quietly. But I'd want my daughter to have the same thing. I thanked her, my throat tight, and took the chart to the little waiting area by the elevator. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone's footsteps echoed in the stairwell. I spread the pages out on the low table. There it was, the date on the will. 3 weeks before he died. I scanned down the notes from that day. Chemo infusion completed. Patient weak, requires assistance with ambulation. Fine motor tremors present. Sedative administered due to anxiety. There was a line in the doctor's handwriting that made my stomach drop. Patient advised against making major legal or financial decisions while on current medication regimen. I stared at that sentence until the words blurred. He had been told not to sign anything big. And 3 days later, according to the neat blue ink on Elliot's copy of the will, he'd sat in an office and calmly reassigned his entire life. I felt the air leave my lungs in one long shaky exhale. On my way out, I stopped by the nurse's station again. Hey, I said softly. Tasha? Can I ask you something? She looked up from her charting. Sure, hon. Do you remember about 3 weeks before he died? Did my father leave the hospital for any appointments? Like off-the-floor official discharge? She frowned, thinking. We didn't like him going anywhere those last weeks. He was on some heavy stuff. That day, I pressed, mentioning the date. Do you remember anything? Her eyes flicked from side to side, replaying some internal tape. He was extra agitated that week, she said slowly. Kept saying he had things to take care of. We told him he should focus on resting. Doctor wrote in his chart about not making major decisions. He even had a little argument with your stepmom about it, I think. My head snapped up. You heard them argue? Not full argument. She shrugged. More like she wanted him to sign something, brought a folder, I remember that. He said he felt too loopy, told her to wait. She left mad. Came back a few days later when he was a little more lucid, but he still wasn't great. She shook her head. Honestly, I don't see how he could have sat through some long appointment. He could barely sit up without help. Something hot burned behind my eyes, but it wasn't from crying. It was a different kind of heat. Thank you, I said, for telling me. She put her hand over mine on the counter. Whatever's going on, get yourself a good lawyer, okay? And take care of you. This stuff, she gestured vaguely in the air, it can eat you alive if you let it. That night, after I put the hospital chart beside the copy of the will on my kitchen table, I called Mr. Turner again. He answered on the second ring. Hello. Mr. Turner, it's Danielle. I need to show you something. In person if you're up for it. There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. You sound like your father when he'd bring me a greasy pile of papers and say, Harold, tell me if I'm about to get robbed. Come by tomorrow. Morning's best. 9 o'clock. His office was smaller than I remembered, crammed with boxes and law books, but his eyes were still sharp behind the wrinkles. I laid everything out on his desk. The old will he'd drawn up years ago. He'd pulled a copy from his files. The new will from Elliot, the vehicle registration with my father's older signature, the hospital notes. He took his time. He read. He asked a few quiet questions. What was my father like near the end? How involved had Vanessa been? Who recommended Elliot? When he finally leaned back, steepling his fingers, the look on his face made my heart drop and lift at the same time. I'm retired, he said slowly, and I can't say anything definitive. He tapped the newer will with one knuckle. But I can say I don't like the smell of this. Is it forgery? I asked. He shook his head slightly. Signatures too close to how he used to sign, but cleaner than what a sick man could do. Could be he signed with assistance. Could be. Someone guided him a little too much. His eyes met mine. The bigger issue I see is capacity. You've got a doctor's note advising no major decisions, a nurse who overheard them argue, and a brand new lawyer who just happens to do all the paperwork in his own office with his own witnesses. He sighed, the sound heavy. It has the shape of undue influence, Danielle. Undue influence, I repeated, tasting the words. It's when someone takes advantage of a person's weakened state to push them into a decision they wouldn't make if they were strong, he explained gently. Your stepmother had access. She controlled the paperwork, the safe, his schedule, and she had a clear financial interest in the outcome. My mind flashed to Vanessa guiding his hand with the pen, the little safe tucked into the closet, the way she'd talked about getting his name on everything. Can I challenge it? I asked. The will. He nodded. You can contest. You'll need another lawyer to represent you, someone still active. It'll be ugly, and it'll take time. People love to say it's just stuff. But when it's the roof over your head and your daddy's life's work, it's never just stuff. I stared at the papers, my father's name written over and over on different lines in different hands. I don't want her to be homeless, I said quietly. I don't want to be cruel. I know, he said. And that's exactly why your father trusted you with it all in the first place. Because you're not cruel. He tapped the older will. He wanted someone with a sense of fairness controlling how it went after he was gone. Not someone with a sense of entitlement. I swallowed. If I do this, everyone is going to think I'm trying to grab money, that I can't stand sharing with her. Some people will think that no matter what you do, he said simply, you have to decide whose opinion you can live with, hers or your own. When you look in the mirror 10 years from now and ask yourself if you let your father's wishes get buried for the sake of keeping the peace. Silence settled between us for a moment, thick and heavy. Do you know anyone? I asked finally. Another lawyer. He nodded. I've got a name. She's tough, fair, doesn't like bullies. He wrote it on the back of his old business card, his hand shaking just slightly. Take this. Tell her I sent you. I looked at the card, then back at him. What if I lose? I whispered. He shrugged, a slow, creaky roll of his shoulders. Then you lose. And you'll grieve that, same as you're grieving your father. But you'll do it knowing you stood up for him when he couldn't stand up for himself. That counts for something, even when the law doesn't see it. I left his office with the card in my pocket and a new kind of weight on my shoulders. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was a choice. I told myself I would talk to Vanessa first. Give her a chance to explain, to maybe admit that things had gotten out of hand, that she'd been scared and trying to secure a future. Maybe she'd agreed to change the arrangement, to sell the house and split the proceeds, to let me buy the shop from her over time. Maybe we could handle it like family, not enemies across a courtroom. I drove to the house on Maple in the late afternoon. The sun slanted across the porch where Daddy used to sit and drink his coffee. The dogwood tree's petals had all fallen now, leaving green leaves and bare branches behind. Her car was in the driveway. Music pulsed faintly through the front door. I walked in without knocking. It was still my father's house in my bones, even if the papers said otherwise. She was in the kitchen, cabinets open, pulling plates down and stacking them on the counter. There were cardboard boxes on the floor, the kind you get from the liquor store. A stack of my father's worn t-shirts sat on a chair, folded haphazardly. What are you doing? I asked. She jumped, nearly dropping a plate. Jesus, Danielle, you scared me. She pressed a hand to her chest. I'm starting to pack some things. The lawyer said I should think about what I want to do. I haven't decided if I'm going to keep this place or sell, and get something more modern. I looked around. The curtains my father's mother had sewn. The crooked cabinet door he'd fixed 3 times. The mark on the ceiling from when the washing machine had overflowed and soaked through the upstairs floor. Modern, I echoed. She rolled her eyes. Don't start. This isn't a museum. Your dad's gone. I have to think about my future now. I took a slow breath. That's what I came to talk to you about. She went still, sensing a shift in the air. Okay. I laid the papers on the table, old will, new will, hospital notes. Her eyes flicked over them, her jaw tightening. I talked to Mr. Turner, I said. I talked to the hospital. I talked to the nurse who heard you arguing about him signing something when he was high on meds. Her shoulders went rigid. You had no right to. I had every right. I cut in, my voice low but steady. I'm his daughter. And I watched him get weaker and weaker while you took more and more of his life into your hands. I took care of him too, she snapped. Don't act like you were the only one. I know you did some things, I said. I saw it. I'm not saying you never cared. But this, I tapped the newer will. This isn't just taking care. This looks like taking control. She looked at me for a long moment, the kitchen clock ticking loudly in the silence. What do you want, Danielle? She asked finally. Just say it. I want what he wanted when he was still himself, I said. The house and the shop were supposed to be mine to manage. You know that. Everyone who's known him longer than 3 years knows that. I'm willing to make sure you're okay. I'm not trying to leave you on the street. But I won't pretend this paper is fair. And I won't pretend he signed it the way he would have if he weren't sick and scared and tired. Her eyes flashed. So you are going to try to take me to court, she said. Little Miss Perfect Daughter, coming for the poor widow. I'm going to contest the will, I said quietly. On the basis of undue influence and lack of capacity. I talked to a lawyer. I have enough to try. Her face went through a whole storm of expressions. Shock, anger, fear, calculation. You don't have money for that, she scoffed weakly. Lawyers cost. Court costs. You're going to waste what little you have just to spite me. It's not about spite, I said. It's about respect. For him. For what he built. For what he told me since I was 16, standing in that driveway with his truck keys in my hand. She laughed, then a short, bitter sound. You always thought you were the only one who mattered to him. I shook my head. No. I just know I mattered to him differently than you did. And I'm not going to let you rewrite that for likes and sympathy online. Her jaw clenched. For a moment I thought I saw tears shine in her eyes. Then she blinked and they were gone, replaced with something hard. You do what you think you gotta do, she said coldly. But don't come crying to me when the judge throws your little story out and I'm the one left with the deeds and the keys. I picked up my papers, folding them carefully. We'll see, I said. In front of a judge. Not in front of your followers. And then I walked out of my father's house, the slam of the screen door echoing behind me like a final period on the sentence of our old life. I wish I could say that after walking out of that house I felt strong and righteous, like those women in movies who march into a storm and never look back. The truth is I sat in my car and shook. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, my breath coming in short, uneven pulls. I watched the front door expecting Vanessa to burst out and call me back to say, wait, let's talk about this like grown women. The way I wished we could. The door stayed closed. A dog barked down the street. A lawnmower started somewhere nearby, that low mechanical hum rising and falling. Life went on. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, blew out a long breath, and pulled the business card from my pocket, the one Mr. Turner had written on. Alicia Ramos, attorney at law. There was a number under her name. My fingers hovered over the keypad on my phone for a few seconds. Then I dialed. Her office was downtown, in an old brick building above a bakery that smelled like sugar and yeast. The stairwell walls were lined with framed photos of marches and rallies, workers' rights, voting rights, women holding signs. It felt like walking up into a story older than both of us. Alicia herself was in her 40s, with close-cropped curls and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a navy blazer over a simple blouse, no flashy jewelry, just a silver ring on one hand. So, she said after we went through the basics, names, dates, relationships. Tell me what happened. Start from the beginning. Not the legal beginning. Your beginning. So I did. I told her about the little blue house on Maple, about my mother leaving, about the truck and the promises in the driveway. I told her about Vanessa in the yellow dress, the selfies, the way she'd slipped into our life first as an extra chair at the table and then as a fixture. I told her about the chemo, the spa selfies, the safe in the closet, the guided hand over the pen. I didn't realize how much I'd been holding in until the words started to spill out. At one point my voice cracked. She slid a box of tissues across the desk without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back, tapping the capped end of her pen against her notepad. You have some pieces, she said. Now we have to see if they line up enough to build something strong. She went over what I already had, the old will from Mr. Turner, the new one from Elliot, the hospital records, the notes about his capacity. She asked for names. Nurses, neighbors, church members, anyone who'd seen him in those last months. We're not just talking about money, she said. We're talking about honoring his intent. Courts look at patterns. Who did he talk about leaving things to before he got sick? How did he act when he had all his faculties? That older will tells me a lot. He wanted me to have the house and the shop, I said quietly. Not so I could be rich. Just so I'd be okay. So his work meant something after he was gone. She nodded. And by all accounts, you've been doing that work with him for years. I thought of my oil-stained fingernails, of explaining timing belts to confused customers in the front office, of counting out change from the old metal drawer. Yes, ma'am, I said. She smiled a little at the ma'am, but she didn't correct me. Here's what we can do, she said. We file to contest the will based on undue influence and lack of capacity. We ask the court to look at medical records, testimony. We may subpoena the new lawyer, Elliot, to explain his process. We ask why he didn't verify with the long-term attorney. Why there's such a clean signature from a man whose doctor said he shouldn't be signing anything at all. My stomach tightened. Will Vanessa have to be there? Most likely, she said. She's the primary beneficiary. She'll have her own lawyer. They'll say you're bitter, greedy, jealous. You'll have to decide now if you can handle hearing that. I thought of Vanessa's last words in the kitchen. Little Miss Perfect Daughter, coming for the poor widow. A small tired laugh escaped me. I heard it already, I said. Courtroom or kitchen, it stings the same. Alicia's gaze softened. This kind of case, it doesn't end with hugs and family dinners, she said plainly. Even if you win, you lose something. Are you prepared for that? I looked down at my hands. There was a faint oil stain at the base of my thumbnail that I hadn't noticed until then. I rubbed at it with my thumb. I already lost my father, I said. I lost the version of her I tried so hard to believe in. This point, I'm just trying not to lose him twice. Once to the cancer, and once to whatever this paper says he wanted when I know better. She nodded once like that was the answer she needed to hear. All right then, she said. Let's get to work. Word gets around fast in a small town. Faster sometimes than the truth can keep up. Vanessa got ahead of it on social media. Within a week of Alicia filing the contest, her Facebook and Instagram were full of long captions. Grief brings out the worst in people. Some folks can't stand to see a woman left with anything. I would never fight over a dead man's things, but some people are just built different. She never used my name. She didn't have to. Her followers filled the comments with sympathy. Stay strong, sis. They just jealous. He married you, that says it all. Some of those comments came from people I knew. Women from church. A girl I'd gone to high school with. The cashier at the grocery store who'd once asked me if Daddy could look at her car. I found out because my cousin Tara sent me screenshots. You see this, she texted. I know you don't live online like that, but she's out here building a whole soap opera. I stared at the phone, my chest tight. I can't control what she posts, I replied. I can only control what happens in court. Tara called me. You want me to light her up in the comments? She asked, half joking, half ready. I almost said yes. It would have felt good for about 5 minutes to see someone clap back for me. No, I said finally. Let her say what she wants. I swallowed. If folks want to judge me without hearing my side, that's on them. Not on me. You sound like Aunt Ruby, Tara muttered. All wise and patient and stuff. Is that a bad thing? Nah, she sighed. Just means you're gonna take the high road while I'm down here wanting to cuss somebody out on your behalf. We both laughed, a small needed break in the heaviness. Just pray for me instead, I said. I've been doing that, she replied. And for what it's worth, the people who really knew your daddy, they know. Social media ain't that powerful. She was right. Miss Clara from the farmer's market left a bag of tomatoes on my porch one morning with a note. Your father talked about you every week. Don't forget what you know. Deacon Harris stopped me after church. I don't understand all that legal mess, he said, patting my shoulder. But I remember your daddy standing in that parking lot telling me, when I go, Danny's got it. Don't let anybody make you question that. Those small confirmations were like bricks under my feet, something solid to stand on when the waves of doubt came. The first hearing was just a preliminary one, about paperwork and dates, but it felt like a battlefield. The courtroom was smaller than on TV. No grand oak panels, just beige walls and rows of hard benches. The judge was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. Her nameplate read Judge Whitaker. Vanessa sat on the other side of the aisle in a black dress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Next to her was a man in an expensive suit, her lawyer. Elliot sat 2 rows behind them, pretending not to be nervous and failing. I sat with Alicia, my hands folded so tight in my lap my knuckles ached. When the case number was called, my name sounded strange echoing off those walls. Miss Coleman and Miss Coleman, Judge Whitaker said, glancing over the file. Contested will. Allegations of undue influence and lack of capacity. I understand this is a family matter, but from this point on, we will treat it as a legal matter. Emotion should not guide behavior in this courtroom. Understood? Yes, Your Honor. Both lawyers replied in unison. The judge looked at me and Vanessa. Understood. Yes, ma'am, I said. Vanessa nodded, her lips pressed together. The initial motions were mostly in the language of lawyers, admit this, deny that, schedule depositions. But one thing Alicia insisted on stood out. She requested that my father's medical records around the time of the will signing be made part of the court's evidence. Vanessa's lawyer objected. Your Honor, that's private medical information. My client doesn't see how that's relevant to his testamentary. That goes directly to capacity. Alicia cut in, calm but firm. The question is not whether he loved his wife. The question is whether he was in a position to fully understand and freely consent to the legal document he signed 3 weeks before death. Judge Whitaker raised a hand. Enough. I'll allow the medical records under seal. They'll be used only in relation to this case. A small victory but a crucial one. When the hearing ended, people began to file out. Vanessa stood, adjusted her purse strap and looked back at me. For a moment there was a flicker of something that almost looked like the girl from the diner, the one who made my father blush with a $20 tip story. Then her face hardened again. You really okay doing this? She muttered as I passed, just low enough that the bailiff wouldn't hear. I stopped, turned slightly toward her. No, I said honestly. I'm not okay. But I'm going to do it anyway. She scoffed, shook her head like I was some stubborn child, and walked out into the hallway where I noticed she immediately pulled out her phone. Alicia touched my arm. Don't engage, she said quietly. We'll speak with evidence, not side comments. I nodded, watching Vanessa's silhouette disappear through the glass door. This was only the beginning. The months that followed were a blur of things I'd never imagined myself doing. Giving a statement under oath in Alicia's small conference room. The digital recorder on the table capturing every tremor in my voice. Sitting beside Tara as she recounted how she'd seen Vanessa bragging at a barbecue about finally getting Joey to put her on the paperwork. Laughing that men are so easy when they're scared. Listening as the hospital's records custodian confirmed the authenticity of the notes Alicia had pulled. Especially the line about doctors advising against major decisions. Watching Tasha, the nurse with the sunflower tattoo, sit up straight and tell the court reporter he was not in a condition to fully process legal documents. I told his wife as much. Every piece added another layer. Every story made the shape of what had happened clearer. Less like a bad dream and more like something with edges and consequences. At night, alone in my small apartment, I'd sit on the couch with the TV off, the silence pressing around me. The grief for my father would sneak up in odd ways. Smelling motor oil and wanting to call him about a weird engine noise. Hearing an old song he loved at the grocery store. Sometimes I wondered if he'd be mad at me. If somewhere beyond my understanding he was shaking his head and saying, "Let it go, baby. Let her have it and move on. It's not worth the fight." But then I'd remember the look in his eyes when he handed me those truck keys at 16. The pride in his voice when he told people, "My girl's gonna run this place one day." That memory became my compass. I wasn't just fighting Vanessa. I was fighting for the promise he had made, and the one I had silently made back, that I would take care of what he left behind, not just let it be flipped like a yard sale find. The main hearing date finally came in late fall. By then, The leaves on Maple Street had turned the color of rust and fire. The air had that crisp bite that makes you pull your jacket tighter. I stood outside the courthouse for a minute watching people go in, some for traffic tickets, some for divorces, some for things I'd never know. Everyone carrying their own stories, their own quiet storms. I whispered a little prayer. Not for victory exactly. For truth. For courage. For enough. Then I squared my shoulders and walked inside. Courtrooms have a particular kind of quiet. Not like a church where the silence feels holy. Not like a funeral home where it feels heavy. In that courtroom the silence felt watchful. Like the walls were waiting to see who would tell the straighter story. We sat where we'd sat before, Vanessa and her lawyer on one side, me and Alicia on the other. A few people from town were scattered on the benches. I saw Miss Clara, her hands folded over her purse. Deacon Harris. My cousin Tara, jaw set, eyes already daring someone to say something sideways. Judge Whitaker took her seat. The bailiff called the room to order. Papers rustled, chairs creaked, and then it was just voices. "Counsel," the judge said. "You may proceed with your opening statements." Vanessa's lawyer went first. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked a few steps toward the bench, his tone smooth. He talked about a loving wife caring for a dying husband. About a man who'd seen his mortality and wanted to provide for the woman who'd been by his side day and night in his final years. He painted me with soft strokes, grieving, confused, perhaps struggling to accept that her father's priorities changed when he remarried. "She is not malicious," he said, gesturing briefly in my direction. "But grief can twist our perceptions. Our position is simple. Mr. Coleman knew what he wanted, and he put it in writing while still of sound mind. To second-guess his final wishes is to insult his memory." Then it was Alicia's turn. She didn't pace. She didn't raise her voice. She stood with both hands lightly resting on the table. "Your Honor," she said, "this case is not about whether Mr. Coleman loved his wife. It's clear he did. It's not about whether my client, his daughter, is grieving. Of course she is. This case is about two questions. Did Mr. Coleman have the capacity to understand the legal consequences of the will he signed 3 weeks before his death? And did his wife, who controlled his access, his paperwork, and his environment, exert undue influence over that decision for her financial gain?" She let that sit for a moment, then continued. "We will show you a pattern. A long-standing plan for his estate drawn up when he was healthy. A sudden sweeping change at the weakest point in his life. Medical records where his own doctor advised against major decisions. And testimony from those who saw his confusion and her pressure." Her eyes flicked briefly toward Vanessa, then back to the judge. "At the end of this, we're not asking you to choose between a wife and a daughter. We are asking you to choose between a man's long-stated wishes and a document executed under circumstances that should make any court pause." The judge nodded, made a note, and we began. I testified first. Standing in that witness box felt like standing under a magnifying glass. I swore to tell the truth, my voice catching just a little on the word truth. Alicia led me through my story, but more slowly this time, piece by piece. My childhood in the house. Working at the shop. The truck at 16. His promises, not in legal language but in the everyday way he talked. "When I go, this is yours." She asked about Vanessa coming into our lives, and I told the truth. The laughter. The dinners. The way she made him feel younger. The shift when he got sick. The selfies at spas. The safe in the closet. Her hand over his while he signed papers I wasn't allowed to read. She didn't push me to call Vanessa names. She didn't need to. The facts did enough. When it was Vanessa's lawyer's turn to cross-examine, he tried to poke holes. "Miss Coleman," he said, "is it fair to say you never fully approved of your father's relationship with my client?" "I had concerns," I said, "about the age difference, about how quickly she moved in. But I wanted him to be happy." "Did you ever express those concerns to him?" "Yes." "So when he chose to marry her anyway, against your advice, that must have been hard for you." "It was an adjustment," I said. "But he was an adult. It was his choice." "You say you worked in his business." He flipped a page. "Did you draw a salary from that business?" "Yes." "You lived rent-free in his house until you moved out at 27? "Yes." "So you benefited from your father's resources for years." Is it possible, he leaned on the word, that you simply resent another woman now having access to what used to be solely yours? Alicia started to object, but I shook my head slightly. I could answer that. I never thought of his house and shop as mine while he was alive, I said. They were his. I was living with him, not off him. When he talked about me having them one day, it wasn't about me getting something for nothing. It was about me continuing what we built together. There's a difference. He watched me for a beat, then moved on. Isn't it true, he asked, that your father could be stubborn? I almost smiled. Yes. And that if he didn't want to sign something, no one could make him? When he was healthy, yes, I said. When he was sick, sedated, and scared, he was more vulnerable. That's what this is about. He didn't like that answer, but there wasn't much he could do with it. Vanessa testified next. She walked to the stand like it was a stage she knew well. Her black dress was simple but flattering. Her makeup just enough to make her eyes look a little wetter, her lips a little softer. She swore in, then folded her hands in her lap. Her lawyer asked her to describe her relationship with my father. She painted it like a romance movie. Him leaving her a big tip, their first date at the diner after closing, him bringing her flowers, telling her she made him feel alive again. She talked about cooking for him, about staying up with him when the pain got bad, about being the one who had to wipe his tears and other things. She added for sympathy. She choked up when she described his last days. The judge passed her a box of tissues. She dabbed at her eyes. When her lawyer asked about the will, she straightened her shoulders. He wanted to take care of me, she said thickly. He kept saying, Ness, you're so much younger. You got your whole life ahead of you. I don't want you left with nothing but memories and bills. He was obsessed with that idea. He said Danielle would be fine, she's strong, she's safe. But me? I gave up my job, my independence. I put my life on hold. Of course he wanted to protect me. Her lawyer nodded, satisfied. And did you ever force him to sign anything he didn't want to sign? Never, she said, looking right at the judge. I might suggest. I might remind him. But he was a grown man. He could say no. Then it was Alicia's turn. She didn't attack. She asked questions like she was taking apart an engine, one bolt at a time. Mrs. Coleman, she began, you mentioned you gave up your job to be with your husband. That was at the diner, correct? Yes. So minimum wage plus tips? Yes. And after you moved in with Mr. Coleman, did you have any other employment besides your social media activities? No. He didn't want me overworking. Did he draw up any sort of contract with you, promising to pay you for caregiving? No, she said, a little defensive. We were married. I wasn't his nurse, I was his wife. Understood, Alicia said. So financially speaking, if he had passed without updating his will, leaving the house and business to his daughter, you would have had what exactly? She hesitated. I don't know. We didn't talk about it like that. No marital property, no separate income, no share in the business, Alicia summed up. Just his personal belongings and perhaps some support via the estate, subject to court approval. Vanessa's jaw tightened. That's why he changed it. Let's talk about that change, Alicia said softly. On the day he signed this new will, did you discuss it with his medical team? No. Why would I? Did you ask his doctor whether he was in a good state to make legal decisions? He was awake, she argued. He knew who I was, he knew what day it was. He said what he wanted. Did you tell his doctor that you were taking him to a lawyer's office? No. Again, why would I? It's our private business. Alicia nodded slightly, as if she'd expected exactly that answer. You've heard the nurse testify, she continued, that your husband's doctor advised against him making major legal or financial decisions while under heavy medication. You heard the hospital record entered into evidence confirming that. Did you ever read that note? I don't remember, Vanessa said. There were a lot of papers. Did you ever mention to Attorney Elliott that the hospital staff had suggested he not sign anything serious at that time? Her eyes flicked toward Elliott for a fraction of a second. No. Why not? Because? She spread her hands. Because Joey told me he wanted to do it. He said he didn't have time to wait. He was scared. He wanted to make sure I was okay. I wasn't going to tell him no. It never occurred to you, Alicia asked, that a frightened, medicated, dying man might not be in the best position to make life-altering legal decisions? That perhaps the timing could wait a week? A day? Tears filled Vanessa's eyes again, but there was steel under them. If I had waited and he'd died before signing it, she said, her voice trembling, you'd be standing here saying I should have done more. There's no winning with you people. Alicia let that sit, then changed tack. Do you recall an argument in his hospital room where he said he felt too loopy to sign something? Vanessa stiffened. I don't know what you're talking about. Tasha Andrews, Alicia said, gesturing toward the gallery where the nurse sat, testified under oath that she heard him say that to you, that he asked you to wait, and that you left upset. She's misremembering, Vanessa snapped. Everyone is piling on me like I'm some thief. Alicia didn't rise to the bait. One last question, Mrs. Coleman. Who selected Attorney Elliott to draft the new will? You or your husband? We both did, she said. I found him online, I set up the appointment, I drove us there. But it was for both of us. We were a team. Alicia nodded. No further questions. Elliott himself had to testify, too. He looked less confident on the stand than he had behind his sleek desk. Under Alicia's questions, he admitted that he hadn't requested medical records, that he'd relied on his impression, that Mr. Coleman was competent that day, that the witnesses were his own staff, that he had not asked whether there was a prior will on file with a long-term attorney. You didn't find it relevant, Alicia asked, that a man with a decades-long relationship with another lawyer suddenly came to you, a stranger while gravely ill, to completely rewrite his estate plan in favor of a new spouse? He cleared his throat. People change lawyers all the time. Yes, she said. But they don't usually wait until morphine and chemo are part of the equation. There was a ripple of uneasy laughter in the gallery that the judge quickly hushed. When all the testimony was done, the lawyers made their closing arguments. Vanessa's attorney talked again about love and intention, about modern families, about how fairness is subjective. Alicia talked about patterns. How a man behaves for 30 years matters, she told the judge. What he says for decades about his wishes matters. A sudden sweeping change orchestrated by the one person who had both the most to gain and the most control, at the moment of his greatest weakness, should trouble this court. She held up the two wills. In this one, she said, lifting the older one, Mr. Coleman leaves his assets to his daughter, trusting her to make decisions for the family. In this 1 inch, she lifted the newer one. Everything shifts conveniently to the new wife who has no income of her own and who, by her own admission, did not disclose relevant medical advice to the attorney drafting it. She set them down side by side. We are not asking for Mrs. Coleman to be left destitute. The law provides protections for surviving spouses. We are asking that this rushed, questionable document not be allowed to erase a lifetime of intent and a previous, valid will drawn up when Mr. Coleman was clearly of sound mind. When she sat down, my heart was thudding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Judge Whitaker took a long time before she spoke. She looked through her notes. She shuffled the wills. She reread something in the hospital file. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock on the back wall tick. Finally, she set her pen down. I have listened carefully to all the testimony, she began. I have reviewed the medical records, the prior will, and the circumstances surrounding the execution of the new will. She looked first at Vanessa, then at me. This is, at its heart, a sad case, she said. A man died. Two women who loved him in different ways are now on opposite sides of a legal line. She paused. Based on the evidence, I do not find sufficient proof that Mr. Coleman's signature on the newer will was forged. However, she held up a hand when Vanessa's lawyer started to smile. I do find significant concerns about his capacity at the time, and about the influence exerted over him. My breath caught. The medical records clearly state that he was advised against making major legal decisions, she continued. Testimony from medical staff supports the view that he was weak, medicated, and at times confused. We have no neutral third-party witnesses at the will signing who knew him prior to his illness and could attest to his state of mind. The new will's terms represent a drastic departure from his long-established estate plan, with no compelling explanation offered beyond the understandable, but self-interested, desire of a spouse to be financially secure. She folded her hands. Therefore, this court finds that the will executed 3 weeks before Mr. Coleman's death is invalid due to undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. It took me a second to process the words. Invalid. Vanessa made a strangled sound, half gasp, half growl. The prior will, drawn up by attorney Harold Turner, is reinstated as the controlling document, Judge Whitaker went on. Assets will be distributed accordingly. However, she looked at me now directly. State law provides an elective share for surviving spouses who are effectively disinherited. Mrs. Coleman is entitled to a portion of the estate's value, to be calculated according to statute. I will not leave a widow with nothing after 3 years of marriage, regardless of my concerns about her methods. I nodded, tears burning my eyes. That felt right. Hard but right. In practical terms, the judge continued, this means Ms. Danielle Coleman will receive the house, the automotive business, and the vehicle as outlined in the original will, subject to satisfying Mrs. Vanessa Coleman's elective share, either through a negotiated buyout, sale of certain assets, or other arrangement agreed upon by counsel. She tapped her gavel lightly. Court is adjourned. The room exploded in sound then. People standing, murmuring, Vanessa's lawyer hissing something in her ear. Tara exhaling a, "Thank you, Jesus," under her breath. I just sat there for a second, dazed. Alicia touched my shoulder. You did it, she said quietly. Or rather, we did what we could. The rest is numbers and negotiations. Across the aisle, Vanessa was staring at me. Her face was pale under her makeup, her eyes bright with anger and something like panic. You couldn't just let me have it, she said under her breath as she passed, leaning toward me for a moment. You always had to be the favorite. I met her gaze, feeling tired down to my bones. This was never about being the favorite, I said softly. It was about what was fair. For him. And actually, this is probably more fair to you than what he wrote with Mr. Turner. You at least get something. She scoffed, tears spilling now for real. You think I want your charity? No, I said. I think you want more than what's right. And I can't give you that. Not anymore. She shook her head, muttered something I couldn't catch and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. People came up to me. Miss Clara squeezing my hands, Deacon Harris nodding, saying, Your daddy's smiling somewhere. Tara hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Through it all, I kept seeing two images layered over each other in my mind. My father's shaky hand trying to hold a pen, and that too smooth signature on the page. For the first time since he died, I felt like someone had said out loud what I'd been screaming inside. This wasn't right, and they'd done something about it. But court rulings don't magically put houses back the way they were. They don't rewind relationships, erase bitterness, or repair trust with the stroke of a pen. There was still work to do. Paperwork, appraisals, hard conversations with bankers, meetings where we figured out how to give Vanessa her legal share without gutting the legacy my father left. And beyond all that, there was the quieter work. The work of walking back into that little blue house on Maple, with the knowledge that, on paper at least, it was finally mine. Not as a trophy, as a responsibility. The first time I walked back into the house on Maple after the court ruling, I stood on the porch for a long time with the key in my hand. It was the same key I'd used since I was a teenager. The metal worn smooth where my fingers had gripped it 1,000 times. But that day it felt heavier. I could hear traffic in the distance, a dog barking, a lawnmower starting up 2 houses over. The world was ordinary. I was the one who had changed. I slid the key into the lock. The door opened with that same soft groan I'd heard my whole life. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something floral, Vanessa's doing. The furniture was still half shifted from her packing frenzy. Boxes against the wall, a couple of bare nails where pictures had hung. I put my hand flat on the entryway wall. I'm back, Daddy, I whispered. The word disappeared into the quiet, but saying it out loud loosened something in my chest. The legal aftermath took months to sort out. Alicia and Vanessa's lawyer went back and forth, spreadsheets and appraisals and letters with too many numbers. In the end, the estate's value was calculated. The house, the shop, the truck, the small amount in his bank accounts. After debts and fees, the judge's order meant Vanessa was entitled to a slice of that pie. We have a few options, Alicia explained one afternoon at her office, our heads bent over the paperwork. You can sell the house and split the proceeds, but I know you don't want that. You can sell the business, but that would be like burying your father a second time. Or, I asked. Or we structure a buyout, she said. You keep the house and shop. You take a small business loan, maybe refinance the mortgage that's already paid off, and pay her share in installments. It will be tight for a while, but you'll still own what matters in the long run. I thought about having a mortgage again after my father had spent 30 years paying it off. Felt like going backward. But then I thought about his hands, his voice. I want you to have something solid under your feet. Solid doesn't always mean easy. Let's do the buyout, I said. I'll work. I know how to do that part. Alicia nodded, already scribbling notes. I figured you'd say that. The bank manager, a gray-haired woman named Mrs. Lee, had known my father. He was always honest, she said as we went over the loan documents. Sometimes a little late, but never ducked a payment. She smiled. You have that same look when you're doing math in your head. I got that from him, I said. She lowered her voice. I heard about what happened, with the will. I'm not supposed to say this, but I'm glad you spoke up. Too many people just roll over because they don't want to cause trouble. Felt like I was causing nothing but trouble, I admitted. Sometimes trouble is just the word people use when you won't let them walk all over you, she said dryly, sliding the final paper toward me to sign. The pen felt steadier in my hand than I expected. This time when I wrote my name there was no one guiding it but me. Vanessa took the arrangement. Her lawyer sent an email accepting the buyout terms. No apology, no extra words. Just numbers and dates. I heard through the grapevine that she moved into a newer apartment complex on the other side of town. A place with a pool and a little gym. The kind of spot that photographs well. She sold most of the furniture she'd bought with my father. Mid-century modern pieces that never quite fit the crooked floors of the old house. I let her take anything she wanted that wasn't stained with our history. The trendy bar stools, the geometric rugs, the framed prints of cities he'd never visited. I kept the old scratch dining table. One afternoon, she came by with her lawyer to sign the final transfer documents. We sat at that table, the surface still scarred from years of plates and elbows and homework. She didn't look at family photos. She kept her eyes on the paper. You'll get the first payment in 30 days, I said quietly, sliding her copy toward her. She nodded, lips a tight line. For the first time, I noticed the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the tiredness under the foundation. I never wanted to be your enemy, I said. She laughed once, bitter. You have a funny way of showing it. You think I did this just to hurt you, I said. But if all I cared about was winning, I could have pushed harder to cut you out completely. The judge would have let that older will stand without the elective share. I didn't fight that part. She finally looked up at me. You want me to be grateful? No, I said. I want you to understand this wasn't about you as much as you think it was. It was about him. About what he said for years. About the promises he made when there weren't any pills in his system or lawyers in the room. She stared at me for a long second, something unreadable in her eyes. Then she stood up, her chair scraping the floor. Keep your house, Danielle, she said. Keep your little shrine. I'll build something that's mine without you or him. She walked out without another word. Her perfume lingered in the air for a few minutes after the door closed. Eventually it faded. Other smells took over again. Lemon cleaner, old wood, the faint, comforting hint of motor oil that seemed to live in my clothes no matter how much I washed them. Running the shop on my own was a different kind of challenge. The first morning I opened the doors as the owner, not just Joe's girl. I stood in the bay and listened to the echo. The fluorescent lights buzzed on one by one. The roll-up doors rattled when I pulled the chains. The air smelled like it always had. Rubber, grease, coffee, and a little bit of sweat. I put my hand on the old metal workbench. All right, Daddy, I murmured. Show me how not to mess this up. The first customer that day was Mr. Peterson, an old farmer with a truck that had been coming to our shop longer than I'd been alive. He stepped inside, looked around, and his gaze landed on me behind the counter. Well, he said, adjusting his cap. Guess I should say congratulations, huh? I smiled. Feels like a strange word in this situation, but thank you. He nodded. Your daddy always said you'd be the one talking to me about my bad breaks one day. He slapped his keys into my hand. Let's see what you can do. Business didn't boom overnight. Some folks were hesitant, still seeing me as the helper instead of the boss. A couple of men tried to talk past me, asking if there's a guy I can speak to about this transmission. There is, I'd say, picking up a rag to wipe my hands. It's me. Now tell me what it's doing when you hit 60. Word got around. The men who thought a woman couldn't run a shop went elsewhere. The ones who cared more about honest work than gender stayed. New customers came too, single moms, young women, older ladies who admitted they used to dread going to mechanics. It's nice to have someone explain it without making me feel stupid. One of them told me, a kindergarten teacher with a rattling sedan. My daddy taught me some things, but he's gone now. I understood that particular ache deep in my bones. I'll talk you through everything, I said. You don't ever have to pretend you know something you don't with me. In taking care of their cars, in listening to their stories while they waited, about sick parents, cheating husbands, kids leaving home, I realized something. I wasn't just keeping my father's business alive, I was building my own kind of ministry, right there between the oil pans and the coffee maker. At home, the healing happened in smaller, quieter ways. I took down the few framed photos of Vanessa and my father. Not out of spite, but because every time I walked by, my stomach tightened. In their place, I put up a picture of him at 40, laughing with a wrench in his hand. One of me at 16, standing beside the truck, his arms slung around my shoulders. One of the two of us at the farmer's market, holding paper bags full of tomatoes. I didn't erase that she'd been there. There were still traces of her. A stylish lamp in the corner, a set of wine glasses too fancy for us to have ever bought on our own. But the house felt like us again. Not a page from someone else's feed. On Sundays after church, I started a little ritual. I'd come home, change clothes, and take the truck out for a drive. The engine still purred. The seat still had that tear on the driver's side. The steering wheel was smooth from years of his hands and mine. I'd drive back roads with the windows down, the wind tangling my hair, the radio low. Sometimes I'd talk out loud, to him, to God, to the part of myself that still felt 8 years old and abandoned, then 16 and trusted, then 34 and betrayed. One afternoon, as the sun sank low and turned the sky orange, I pulled over at a little overlook where you could see the tops of the trees stretch for miles. I turned off the engine. The ticking of the cooling motor filled the silence. I did it, Daddy, I said softly. I didn't let you go out like a fool. I didn't let them say that the man who taught me to double-check every bolt would just scribble his name anywhere they pointed. A breeze stirred, bringing the smell of pine and distant wood smoke. I wasn't perfect, I admitted. Maybe I was too slow to speak up. Maybe I should have pushed harder sooner. But I tried. I really tried. A bird flew overhead, a dark shape against the bright sky. I sat there until the sun disappeared and the first star came out. When I finally turned the key again, the truck started on the first try, just like always. Driving home, I felt not happy exactly. Grief doesn't turn into happiness like that. But I felt something steady. Like the ground under my feet was solid again. Time softened some of the edges. People stopped whispering when I walked into the grocery store. Vanessa's online posts shifted, from long rants about haters and toxic family, to sponsored content for skincare and meal kits. It was like she folded that entire chapter of her life into a caption and moved on. We didn't talk. I saw her once, nearly a year later, in the cereal aisle. She was wearing leggings and a big sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun. No filter between her and the fluorescent lights. For a second, neither of us moved. "Hi," I said finally. "Hi," she answered, guarded. "How are you?" I asked because my father didn't raise me to ignore people on purpose. She shrugged. "Fine. Working. Paying bills. You know. Life." "Yeah," I said. "I know." We stood there among the boxes of cornflakes and oatmeal, two women who had loved the same man in such different ways. "I heard you're running the shop," she said after a moment, not quite looking at me. "I am," I said. "I'm trying to make him proud." "He was already proud," she said quietly, surprising me. "He wouldn't shut up about you half the time." The words hit me like a little warm stone in the chest. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. She nodded once, then glanced down at her basket. "Well, guess we both got what we got." "Yeah," I agreed. "We did." There wasn't an apology. There wasn't forgiveness fully, not on either side. But there was a kind of ceasefire in that moment, a mutual recognition that we were both, in our own ways, just trying to survive the aftermath of a man who loved us and left us with more questions than answers. We parted without drama. Two carts squeaking in opposite directions. Sometimes, late at night, I sit at the old dining table with a cup of tea and spread out my own papers. Not bills. Not court forms. My will. I sat down with Alicia and drew it up carefully. Clear language. Clear beneficiaries. No secrets. My house and business, it says, to be left to whoever is helping me run them when I am of sound mind and body and ready to pass them on. I made sure there's room for the future. Even if that future looks different than what my father pictured for me. Maybe one day I'll have a husband, a child, a niece who wants to pick up a wrench. Whoever they are, they won't have to guess. Because if I learned anything from standing in that courtroom, in that parking lot, in that hospital basement, it's this. Silence leaves space for other people's greed. Clarity leaves less room for theft. And love, real love, doesn't hide in fine print.